Okay, good morning. We're about to do a 4 elements meditation. Just wanted to speak briefly about the 4 elements. So many cultures have element models, 4, sometimes 5, occasionally more, but I like 4 elements models. It's very fundamental. So we live in a world of sort of ideas and, online and abstraction, and it kind of drives everyone a bit crazy. Yeah, it's a little too abstract for how we're really evolved. And we're on a retreat at the moment in the Slovenian mountains, been going outside, and there's something very stabilizing, kind of regulating, sanifying, is that a word? Makes us sane. Yeah, about sort of touching grass, the kids call it. Or we even say, don't we, like get down to earth, right? We talk about the elements. It's, I think, very easily understood by people. So we could have a sort of more scientific, personality typology and figure out there's 5 different personality metrics weighted at 17% or, these kind of things. And that's fine, and they might be very useful, like more scientifically valid if we were doing a personality test or something like that, right? But they're far less intuitive than the elements. Like, just think like viscerally, physically, like you've been burnt. Everyone here, when you're a little kid and you touch the gas stove and you go, you kind of realize pretty quick, like fire has some qualities. Or on the positive side of fire, if you've ever been camping and sat looking at a fire, you'll realize it's got this beautiful hypnotic quality. And you can take kids from the inner city and put them around a campfire and they'll sit and watch it, or water. Like, think about the beach. Why do people go to the beach? Like, people fly from England to go to a beach somewhere, right? They pay money, they take effort. It's not always pleasant to go through Heathrow or whatever. So all around the world, people understand like water is nice, right? Like, houses cost more if they're by the sea or by the river, or I live by a river, right? So that's, or like romance, like Ljubljana is a romantic city, and part of the reason it has a river flowing through the middle. If it didn't have a river, it'd be slightly less romantic, right? So this is something we kind of get intuitively, or we go up into the mountains because we want the air or the space. Yeah. I think in our kind of modern technological world, this is particularly important. We find a way to contact the elements in different ways. And of course, we can go to the beach, and we can go to the mountains, and we can build a fire and, do gardening to get our hands in the earth. And I recommend that if you're really interested in the elements. I think that's the fundamental way we learn, is not just by listening to a lecture like this. Some people on YouTube, sitting watching their computer about the elements, but like even your computer, that's a rock, right? There's some earthy rockness to a phone in your hand. But I would suggest a good way of learning about these things is physically, in 2 ways. One we're going to do in a minute, but the other way is actually being out. We even say in the elements in English. People say, oh, you've been out in the elements. Yeah, we literally say that. And as I said, this is very cross-cultural. But again, you'll see variations, but it's pretty intuitive. Like shamanic systems all around the world have some sense of this. And you don't really have to explain it very much to people, which I like. Like if I said we were doing a complicated psychometric and you were a 17 gray, you'd be like, okay, what is that? I have to explain it, right? I'm just making that up. Yeah. Whereas if I said, John is earthy, you kind of get that. And we might need a little bit of clarification, like sometimes people confuse air and water, for example, because they've both got a lot of movement in. But mostly it's pretty easy, yeah? So the second way to explore it, other than in the world, is in one's own body. And I think this is even more fundamental. And so, for example, various systems like Theravada or Tibetan Buddhism have 4 element meditations. I'm going to lead you for one in a minute. It's 2 kind of aspects to it, 2 or 3 aspects to it. So I'll explain them before we do them, so it will make more sense. And then when you're doing the meditation, you can just be concentrating on the meditation itself rather than thinking about it. So one would be body parts, right? So the elements have a height order. Okay, so think about the elements. Earth is the heaviest, okay, then water, then fire, then air. Pretty straightforward. They're normally portrayed in that order. So lower part of the body, often earth is sort of belly and below, so quite a lot of the body. Yeah, water, fire, and then air from the throat to the head. Okay. So kind of height of the body and the parts of the body. But we could also look at that like, blood has a lot of fire, right? It's like hot and red and it's moving. Yeah. And then air, well, where is air in the body? The lungs, also in the joints. Okay. Obviously, you're a lot of fluid throughout the body. So we can kind of tune in to specific organs or, saliva for whatever, whatever it is. Things like that. And as well as the height and the specificity, it's also like how we do it. Yeah, so sometimes embodiment's about how. And are we, for example, meditating in a more systematic way? So what element would that be? Earth, right? Okay, are we meditating in a kind of more receptive way? Water. We could change our postures, right? We could be a bit more like yes and open for water. Or when you're meditating, it could be a bit more subtle than that. You might just subtly turn the hands, for example, yeah? Rather than going to like a full kind of, yes pose. And then fire, that determination, that focus, like Rinzai Zen, like, hey, meditate. Yeah? And if you go to different meditation traditions, these elements are more or less apparent. Yeah? So air, kind of imagination, visualization, a bit more new agey sometimes, right? Anyone been to sort of an airy meditation environment? Yeah. There's some earthy ones, you do the Vipassana, there's lots of rules and timings, and it's very like strict in that way. Okay. Just go to a Thai Buddhist place that had a kind of feminine quality, and they would have like taras and different goddesses around, and it had like lots of flowers, and it's very kind of feminine, watery kind of quality. So it's how we're doing it as well as the body parts, right? So this is important. I wanted to explain this before we did it. So if you go and do this meditation on your own, you're not just like, okay, right now I'm doing the earth element and I'm really focusing on my bones because that's really earthy. It's like, okay, yeah, but that's not an earthy energy, right? That's not an earthy way of doing that. I'm going to skip from this bone to that bone to this bone. Like, what are bones? I'm going to imagine a bone. It's like, no. It's important you get sort of both aspects of this, right? Or else you mess it up. Okay, so why would we do a meditation on the elements? To reconnect to this kind of like fundamental reality, in the most physical sense. In terms of physics, you can think of like 3 properties of matter plus heat and energy of matter, right? There's 4 elements. There's one way of thinking about it. We're not really conceptualizing it like medieval scientists, right? We're not trying to conceptualize it in quite that sense. Why else might you do it? Well, these are different aspects of your being. So from just a pure concentration point of view, it just might be a way to be concentrated to meditate, but from an embodiment point of view, the 4 elements are aspects of how we are. Yeah, how we are as people, the possibilities. And what we tend to do is say, well, I'm this kind of person. I do a personality type, and then I'm like stuck in that personality, and it becomes a bit of a cliche, a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Whereas with the elements, we can kind of develop and touch in on a more rounded, a more complete aspect of ourselves. And if we were just doing like focusing on the body, that might be missed, right? If we're focusing on the body, good for concentration, good for sort of general embodiment, becoming more embodied generally, more anchored in our body. But we're sort of missing aspects of our embodiment, right? If we're just habitually in the habitual body we're always in. So this is why it might be a nice addition. I don't know many people who do it like every day, but it's sort of like something you might want to throw in once a week to your meditation practice, for example. Yeah. It's certainly for those of you who need sort of an anchor. I think it's also just interesting. It's a meditation that's quite colorful, lively, alive. It's different aspects you can focus on. Which, if your meditation practice, if you're just focusing on the breath, that's great. But maybe it gets a bit dry, and you want to kind of have a day off. That might be a nice day off. Okay.